Success without soulfulness is an empty victory. And I think one of the things we're learning with all the disruption right now is we bought all of these watches, we bought all of these clothes, we bought all of these handbags, we have these beautiful cars in the driveway, for example, and we can't use them. And so I think the opportunity, because in the midst of darkness, there's always light. The opportunity is we are being forced to confront ourselves. We can't escape in the world anymore. We can't run away from our insecurities and our pain of potential unexpressed. And so now we're in our homes and we're forced to face who we truly are. That's a very powerful place for any human being to be. Oh, what a brilliant question. What a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. You're an amazing young man, Sashin. I thank you. It's Robin Sharma, and you're tuning into the Millionaire Student Show with Sashin.
Sashin.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode on the Millionaire Student Show, where I get the opportunity to pick the minds of this generation's changemakers, disruptors and innovators, and inspirations, dissect their story from the pain they went through, the price they paid, and what their prize looks like today. I formulated the Millionaire Student community because this is what I was searching for when I first entered the entrepreneur world at 17 years old. My mission is to serve you with virtual mentorship. Without taking the thunder away from today's guest, he holds a master's degree in law. However, he could not find peace or satisfaction in his work. He decided to turn his life around and become an author in 1994 when he wrote his first book called Megaliving 30 Days to a Perfect Life, which was motivated by his father and edited by his mother. He became a worldwide sensation with his second book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which sold more than 6 million copies. He's consulted by CEOs and top leaders from the corporate world who seek his advice on how to keep their employees inspired. He has consulted and conducted trainings for many Fortune 500 companies, including Microsoft, Nike, FedEx, and IBM. Organizations such as NASA, Yale University, the Young President's Organization, and Harvard Business School. In 2007, he was named among the top 5 leadership experts in the entire world. In 2011, he was awarded the Golden Gavel honor by Toastmasters International. In 2019, he held the 6th position on the list of the Global Guru's top 30 leadership professionals. The Millionaire Students, please help me welcome 14 times best-selling author who has sold over 15 million copies, translated into 75 languages, and sold in more than 70 countries. Robin Sharma. So Robin, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it, your wisdom, your energy for the next few minutes. And, thank you for being on. Truly appreciate it.
Sashin, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, and congratulations on all your success and all the impact you've been having around the world.
I appreciate it. Robin, you've been through so much in life. I was actually, when I was preparing your introduction to actually introduce you on the show, I started to look at everything from your mess, turning that into your message in life. I looked at, when I put your intro together, I felt that, you actually beyond the invention and creation phase, you actually on your purpose and passion phase. And, when I looked at that, I want to be able to walk the listeners down the path of your journey, because I understand. I looked at your stuff. I've read it. And I want to start up until 1994. And I'll tell you why 1994, because I know from that moment onwards, you started writing, but that's also the year that I was born. So we'll pick it up from there onwards. What was life like before? What was that pain that got you to where you are?
Well, I mean, I think like every one of your viewers and listeners around the world, Session, I think there's been a lot of pain. I think, and there's been a lot of hope and joy as well. I think that the very nature of the human journey, if you're going to get in the game, means you're going to feel some pain, you're going to get some hard knocks, but you're also going to get the glory as well. I think there's this seduction in the world that you can have the rewards of world class and you can have the desires of your heart, but you don't have to take any risks. Of course, you have to take risks. Of course, the bigger the dream, the more the pain.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the bravery to pursue your creative ambitions. So, I mean, look, I didn't fit in school. Teachers didn't think I would amount to very much. I got into a career pre the year that you mentioned that I really didn't feel was aligned for me. When I was growing up, people around me said, well, you be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a teacher. And that brainwashing brings you into a situation where you actually think that if you do those things, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel joyful, peaceful, free, successful, and happy. And so I became a lawyer, but I became a lawyer for all of the wrong reasons. I became a lawyer because I thought I would fit in and I thought it would make me feel successful and content. And yet I'd wake up in the morning and I didn't feel happy. And what I've realized is success, you can have all of the outer things and you can have fame and fortune, but really success is about a sense of inner peace and a sense of feeling that you're doing your own life and living your own values. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about what life was like before I wrote the book.
So I know you coming from a legal background and, majority of the parents out there, they want their children to be something that they've never been. And they want their children to have something that they've never had. So they send them to the best schools. They, push them to become a doctor, lawyer, an accountant. But in 1994, you started writing. And I know you've been very passionate about writing. Was that a way to voice your message, or was that a way to inspire your readers?
Well, it's a great question, Sashin. It wasn't as deliberate as I decided to write a book for a certain reason. I believe if you're open to where the universe leads you, if you trust your instinct, in the 5 a.m. Club, there's a line that's helped a lot of people. And it's, your instinct is more powerful than your intellect. You see, your intellect, the world says mindset is everything. The world says trust your intellect, trust your reason, figure everything out from an intellectual point of view. Does this make sense? Well, I believe your instinct is so much more powerful. When I look in my life, the things I've done from reason often didn't lead me to where I was meant to be. And yet when I trusted the quieter whispers of my instinct and intuition, which I believe is fortune's way of leading you, it led me to the best places, even though my intelligence or my intellect said it was crazy. And so I just trusted my instinct to write this book, and it wasn't like one Friday afternoon I had this whole game plan for the rest of my life. I think if you wake up and you have the bravery to say, here's what feels right to me, even if I'm the only person in my entire community that feels this makes sense, and your faith is larger than your fears, you get led to the most interesting places.
Because when I look at it, I know for a fact that you weren't looking at it from a point of chasing fame. You weren't chasing the fortune, because you looked at writing your own book, your very first book. And when you wrote it, you didn't even look for a publisher. You didn't go down the typical route of someone who wanted this as a business card. And, you became a worldwide sensation with your second book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which sold more than 6 million copies to date. And, what was your vision whilst writing that book in 1997? What did you want to accomplish?
I wanted to serve. I was an unhappy litigation lawyer who felt I was going through the motions, and I felt I was very empty. And so I chased the metrics of success that society sells to all of us. And I became successful on the terms our culture says are success. And I didn't feel any different. I felt worse. I mean, I love what Jim Carrey said. He said, I wish everyone could be famous and successful to realize it's a very empty game. I've never really chased fame, I think in many ways fame is a set of golden handcuffs, right? You become more famous, you have less freedom. And the game of the Titans is really freedom. I see people, I've mentored billionaires for 24 years. A lot of them have less freedom than we do. A lot of them are less happy than we are. A lot of them have a lot more worries, a lot more complexity. The happiest people I've ever met are ski instructors. They're out on the mountain, they're turning people on to what they do, and they're practicing their craft, and they're having fun. So, look, I'm not suggesting success is a bad thing. A lot of the 5 a.m. Club, it's one of the best-selling books in the world right now for a reason. It's full of philosophies, tactics, systems, frameworks that cause exponential success for people based on the 24 years that I've been in the trenches working with NBA stars and footballers and lead captains of industry. But success without soulfulness is an empty victory. And I think one of the things we're learning with all the disruption right now is we bought all of these watches, we bought all of these clothes, we bought all of these handbags, we have these beautiful cars in the driveway, for example, and we can't use them. And so I think the opportunity, because in the midst of darkness, there's always light. The opportunity is we are being forced to confront ourselves. We can't escape in the world anymore. We can't run away from our insecurities and our pain of potential unexpressed. And so now we're in our homes and we're forced to face who we truly are. That's a very powerful place for any human being to be. Because what we've done is we've used money or likes on social media or things as medication to avoid being who we truly are. And I think that's what happened in that year you mentioned. I was forced to confront the way I was living and what I wanted to stand for and what I wanted to represent. And so success is wonderful. Productivity is awesome. We're meant to have a beautiful life. We're meant to have our heart's desires. But that's not the real game. The real game is really, who are you becoming and how many are you serving? I stood in Nelson Mandela's prison cell on Robben Island, and that wintry July morning in Cape Town, and for your viewers above the equator, as July is winter under the equator. And I stood in his prison cell, and my life really changed that day when I saw the enormity of the smallness of his prison cell, and when I stood in the limestone quarry, and when I saw the showers where he would shower naked as an elderly man and people would laugh at him, and when I stood in the courtyard where he would plant his tomatoes and bury his manuscript, and when I learned of the torture and the pain that he experienced, and yet he gets released from Drakenstein prison in Parl, and every picture after that, he's smiling. So success is good, but there's a much deeper game there's a much deeper game to play if you want to be a heavyweight. I'm not saying I'm a heavyweight.
As you start to have, and as you start to pass by with regards to second, third, fourth generational wealth, you start to realize, and people start to realize, that money is just something where you're just adding commas and zeros, and it's not about chasing that. It's about literally chasing the vision. And you mentioned something that's very powerful. During this time right now, you can have a fancy car, fancy watch, but really and truly, if it's stuck in the closet, if it's parked in the garage, you can't take it anywhere. Cleaners and health workers are more famous today than athletes, actresses, actors, because it's just an eye-opening time. But Robin, your books help people in different phases and aspects in their life. In fact, all your books are very different, yet they all have powerful messages. And I've got literally every single book you've ever written. And I'm going to talk about this a bit later, but all your books are different. As I mentioned, they all have a very powerful message and storylines, and they've impacted more than 15 million lives. But where does Robin Sharma's inspiration come from?
My inspiration comes very much from my readers. My inspiration comes from the people you mentioned. You know, I know you're in Joburg. I remember landing at the domestic terminal, and there's a gentleman in the men's who works in the men's washroom, the men's toilet, the men's WC. His name is Arun Jobulani, I believe. And next time you're at the airport, you got to meet him. And I remember the first time I walked in there and he said, "Welcome to my office." And I got to tell you, the whole restroom was immaculate. And he did his work like he was a prime minister or a president. He did his work like Mozart composed music. And what I'm trying to suggest to you is that not only that all labor has dignity, I'm trying to suggest to you that often the real heroes, the real titans, the real successes on the planet are the quiet leaders that no one really knows. The teacher who is underpaid but goes to work with honor every day, over-prepared because she or he knows they can shape human lives. The frontline worker, as you mentioned, who risks their own life every day. The janitor in the restroom who people could dismiss because they're not wearing a Patek Philippe or wearing Louis Vuitton boots, but who quietly says, "I'm living by great values and I'm making a difference and leaving every person I met better than I found them." So the people who inspire me are the people, you know. I was out the other day for a walk and there was a gentleman who was running, and clearly he was very unfit, but he was out running and he was huffing and he was puffing and he was in pain, looked like torture, but he was out there, you know. And so human beings are unbelievable. And we grow and step into our heroism, not during times of ease, but during moments of pain. And that is why we should not judge pain as bad or hard times as to be avoided. We become our truest, bravest, most honorable, most heroic, most loving selves in the crucibles of darkness, in our Robben Island moments, not when we're in the sun, right? Not in the sunshine. I mean, I met someone very close to Nelson Mandela. She said he went into Robben Island a very angry man. It was the 18 years on Robben Island that made him. And so, you know, in the 5 a.m. club, there's this character, Mr. Riley, that so many people have fallen in love with. And he's a billionaire tycoon who teaches his two students how to become successful in the world, but how to become honorable within themselves. And he talks a lot about the value of suffering, because suffering is a purification process. And any great hero, whether it was a Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, whether it was a Mother Teresa, whether it was a Martin Luther King Jr. or Rosa Parks, these people were thrust into leadership, not when everything was going well, but in the moments of adversity. And so moments of adversity should be celebrated and appreciated because they serve to make us who we are.
Writing more than 14 books is definitely equivalent to playing a chess game. Because when I played chess professionally, when I was about 8 years old till 17 years old, my longest game was 4 hours. But you need to be in a state where you're focused with the right vibrations, the right thoughts flowing. How do you maintain a high level of energy whilst being productive and mastering and perfecting your craft?
I would say a few things. And I love the question, Sashin, because I love talking about the creative process. I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. I see myself much more as an artist. As a matter of fact, I don't like operations. I don't like running a business. I love the craft. And so how do I maintain flow state? The word that was coined by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a book called Flow when he worked at University of Chicago. Well, there's a few things. You see, you can be in your logic or you can stand in your genius. You don't get to do both. So what I'm trying to say is we have a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex. This is the seat of reasoning in the human brain. But we do not get our finest ideas. We do not get our sonatas and our symphonies and our Sistine Chapel ceilings when we are stuck in the intellect, in the prefrontal cortex. We must step out of the brain and get to the place beyond the brain to produce our masterworks. And so there are some specific ways to do that, and I do actually get into them in the 5 a.m. Club. And there's actually a model in the book called transient hypofrontality, which is incredibly important because it explains that when you get in, when you're thinking, you're in the thought stage. But transient hypofrontality is actually a phenomenon where transient, for a temporary period of time, hypo, smaller, frontality, you can actually get out of the prefrontal cortex. I don't want to get too complex, but you can actually get out of the prefrontal cortex and your brain waves go from beta down to alpha, down to theta, and this is where genius lives. Now, here's the exciting thing. Every single one of us on the planet can get into transient hypofrontality. We can all get to the seat of genius beyond everyday thinking. Here are some ways to do it. Number one, be with nature. As much as possible. That's why so many of the great artists, so many of the great entrepreneurs, so many of the great financiers, so many of the great scientists did a daily nature walk. In the 5 a.m. Club, there's 10 rituals of daily genius. One of them is the second wind workout. Every day at the end of your creative session, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever it is, go for a nature walk. Go for an ocean walk. If you're in the desert, go for the desert, but it's very powerful. Secondly, solitude. This is why in lockdown, it could be one of the richest times, if not the richest time of creativity in your entire life. While everyone else is watching Netflix and playing with their phones, you can create your masterpiece. Solitude is where geniuses go to produce their best work. 3, the 5 a.m. Club. And I'm not just saying it because I wrote the book. If you look at many of the greatest creatives on the planet in history, they had one thing in common. Not all of them, but many of them. They rose at dawn. You talk about vibration. In India, they get up, all the sages and saints got up between 4 and 6. There's actually a term for it. I think it's called brahmachari or something like that. But they realized between 4 and 6 is the time of the highest vibration. You slept all night. Your brain, your heart, your soul is most available to mantras, meditation, creativity, intuition. Early morning from 4 to 6 is also the period of least distraction. So if you want to get into flow state, you want to get up while the rest of the world is asleep and work on your masterpiece, work on your business plan, work on your game charts. I'd say the final thing, two more things, because I'm so passionate about it. Fasting. I wrote the 5 a.m. Club over 4 years because another thing is, I don't want to fire hose with too much information, but we live in a world that puts out minimum viable mediocrity. It's like put out 1,000 books, put out 1,000 pieces of code, put out 1,000 videos. All you need to put out is one masterpiece to change the world. So I did my best over 4 years to write the best book I possibly could. And a lot of the time while I was doing it, I would fast. Because fasting puts you into a state called autophagy. And autophagy gets you into this incredibly creative mental focus where you also have incredible amounts of energy. So I'd say fasting is important, and then exercise. I mean, exercise releases dopamine, the inspirational neurotransmitter. Exercise releases serotonin, the pleasure neurotransmitter. It releases norepinephrine, which gives you energy. It increases your metabolic rate. So exercise before your work sessions is incredibly important. In the 5 a.m. Club, I call from 5 to 6 the victory hour, and one of the 20-minute pockets in there deconstructs how the superstars exercise so that the rest of your day is much more energetic and much more focused.
But Robin, right now more than ever, we're living in a very uncertain era from the outside, which definitely impacts people on the inside and leaves unanswered questions to anyone that's lost, anyone that's running around aimlessly. How should they find their purpose in the world today?
You know, there's an old movie session with Matt Damon, and I think Ben Affleck was in it too, and it's called Rounders. And there's a scene where these two poker players are meeting with sort of the Yoda, this professor. And I think the Matt Damon character says, how do we find our destiny? And he ponders, and then he reflects, and he says, you don't find your destiny finds you. And it's like that old Zen story, the young Zen student says, if I work day and night, how long will it take to become a master? And the wise master says, oh, it'll take 20 years. And then the student says, well, how about if I double down and I work twice as hard? And the master says, well, then it'll take 40 years. And then the young student says, well, how about if I live day and night, and every second I study and I chase my destiny and I do the work that you're teaching me and I meditate? And he says, it'll take you 50 years. And in frustration, the young student says, well, how come when I say I'm going to work harder, you're telling me finding mastery will take longer? And the great master says, because if all your energy is on chasing your destiny, all your energy is off the journey that will take you to your destiny. The process is the reward. How do you find your destiny? How do you find the genius within versus the living by your ego and your weakest self? You fall in love with the process. You fall in love with every journaling session. You fall in love with every meditation. You fall in love with every 5 a.m. where you're up early, working on your plan, praying, reading the books. Look behind you. Look at those books. I believe we must get away from addiction to doing, addiction to speed, addiction to instant results, addiction to fast wealth. It is the journey and the process that is the victory. You mentioned the book sales. My daughter the other day said, that must make you feel great. Honestly, it's so fleeting. Success, any success I've enjoyed, it means very little to me. It means very little. What is of meaning is the process of the craft of getting better. The process where you get to serve in your work. The process where you get to push the envelope to your edges to see how far you can go. The process of making, in the book I talk about mindset, heart set, health set, soul set, the 4 interior empires. The process of exploiting those and living those. That's the victory. It's not the amount of money. I mean, I know so many people, I've mentored so many billionaires. They said they were happier when they had nothing. There's almost like a minimum viable amount of wealth. Poverty is not what we're suggesting, of course. But it requires so little money to live happily. And then we start chasing more, and it actually brings up all these other issues which diminish your freedom, diminish your joy. So there's I believe there's the right amount of wealth where you have freedom, you can have a nice home, you can do beautiful things for your family, you can give money to those in need, but it's so much less than people think. And then anything more becomes almost an addiction. It's like a shot of heroin in our arm that makes us feel bigger because inside we feel smaller.
Robin, I believe it's an addiction because people want more of that lifestyle. They dig their own grave. They position themselves to say, okay, great. I don't want a California Ferrari. I want a 458. I don't want to live in that apartment or that estate that I was living in. I want to go out and build a mansion. So I want more of it. And then they bury themselves with expenses and debt and lifestyle. And what starts to happen is that's what they're chasing. It's also a bit of, I want to impress other people. And when you fall down that trap of impressing other people, what starts to happen is you got to continuously impress them. You got to continuously make sure they like you and they be around you because of the nice things.
You know, Sashin, what a miserable way to live. I'm not judging. I'm using that word miserable, derived from misery. There is so much suffering that people who look like they have everything have. Not all of them. But it's suffering to... In the 5 a.m. Club, there's a story. Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut are at a Long Island cocktail party. Joseph Vonnegut looks at Joseph Heller and says, how does it feel to know that our host made more money yesterday than you've made from all your royalties from Catch 22? Joseph Heller looks at his buddy and says, it's okay. I have something he'll never have. Vonnegut says what? Joseph Heller says, the feeling that I have enough. And this is what the spiritual masters say. Be in the world, but not of the world. Be in the world. If you like a Ferrari, drive a Ferrari, but drive a Ferrari because you love the smell of the seats and you love the beauty and you love the craftspersonship. Even if you, especially if you just drive it on your own street. But if you are buying the Ferrari or the house or the yachts or the suits or the watches or the handbags, because it's coming from a place of not enough, then work on the not enoughness. So you don't derive your power from the world. If you are deriving your power from the world, from social media likes, from handbags and watches, from cars, from net worth, should you lose it, as so many people are right now,
Mentally takes you out the game.
because you lose your identity. I mean, you know, I'm no master, I'm no guru, I'm a very ordinary person. I don't want fame. Why? I don't want a yacht. I mean, you know, if you have more houses, more things break. You know, anyone who's owned a house, you've got to fix the roof. You've got to go fix the furnace. You've got to then go fix the lawn. You've got
more problems.
The goal of mastery is simplicity, not complexity. I want JPF, joy, peace, and freedom, not FFA, fame, fortune, and applause. I want to be happy.
Hey, I want you to take a quick split second of your time. All I want you to do is hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. I want to update you when I have a next iconic guest on my show. Stay in student mode. And you speaking from being there, you speaking from watching all these different individuals. And Robin, I was there. I was chasing those things. I was very fortunate that I bought the BMW at 18. I bought the Aston Martin at 21. I smashed the Ferrari at 24 years old. I bought the president's home in South Africa at 24 years old. I was wearing those watches when I decided, hold on, there's more to this than just that. I've been down that road. I mean, I'll send you a picture, but I wrote off my Ferrari 1 kilometer, one road away from my house, with my mom in the car to walk out of it. And you looked at the car and you would think both of them are dead. So I've been down that road. I said, I'm not driving. I hired a driver. I bought a V-Class Mercedes. I'm on my phone in the back seat and my focus has just changed. So some people need to go through that, Robin. But when you mentioned mastering your craft, falling in love with the process, it took you 4 years to write the 5 a.m. Club book. 4 years to master that process. I bet you love that process more than when you release the book, than promoting the book. You love writing the book. And most people aren't willing to fall in love with the behind the scenes. They want to be able to only get recognized when they fall in love with when it's launched. And that takes me into my next question. You're huge in core values. That's your backbone. I know your core values are things that you live by. But what are some of the core values that you stand by?
I would say my most important value would be service, contribution. You know, life is very short. It's very easy to lose perspective. You and I, Sashin, are on a tiny planet in a galaxy of trillions of other planets. Even the longest life is an incredibly short ride when you look at the eternity of humanity and the universe. I'm speaking from a scientific point of view. So, you know, I love reading the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and he talks so much about the shortness of life. And he talks so much about, you know, we're going to be food for the worms. And he talks so much about Alexander the Great, this great luminary who was buried in the same place as his mule driver. And so when you connect with your mortality, and you mentioned my books, I mean, I wrote a book 20 years ago called Who Will Cry When You Die, all about your legacy and your mortality. And I think it's inspirational, not depressing, to think about your mortality, because when you think about how fragile life is and how short even the longest life is, then it refocuses you on what's most important. And I believe what's most important is using, when I was on Robben Island, I asked the guide who had been an ANC prisoner, I said, "Did you know Nelson Mandela?" And he said, "Yes. I served with him for 7 years." And I said, "Oh, what was he like?" And he said, "Oh, that man was a humble servant." That's a piece of wisdom. If you want, and ironically, it's the secret of happiness, to serve. So the first value would be service, using my life to serve. I'm not perfect, but I would take a bullet to serve for my brothers and sisters on the planet. Secondly, beauty. The French have a term called aesthète. And I love beauty, whether it's the small graces of the way flowers are coming out right now in springtime where I live, a beautiful meal. I know you're from South Africa. I know you have a global audience, but I mean, the food.
Incredible. For the price that it's world class.
It's just, I just adore the food, Franschhoek and Stellenbosch. And, I was in Paternoster a few years ago when I was writing the 5 a.m. Club. I don't know if you've been to Paternoster. And someone told me yesterday the number one restaurant in the world is in Paternoster. And anyway, so I'd say beauty is very important. 3, family, incredibly important. 4, philanthropy, incredibly important. And I'd say 5th would be self-mastery. I mean, you want peace in the world, find peace in yourself. You want to produce mastery, own your own mastery. You want to be secure in a world that's falling apart, work on your mindset, heart set, health set, and soul set. That's the game. You want to do big things in the world, own your bigness. That's really the main message of the 5 a.m. Club, along with all the tactics. But, I mention it because everyone's talking about mindset. But in the 5 a.m. Club, I said mindset is only 25% of the personal mastery equation. Everyone's talking, work on your mindset. Yeah. Mindset is only your psychology. What about your heart set, your emotionality, your feelings? What about your health set, your physicality? What about your soul set?
You need that balance.
Well, that's the balance. How can you do amazing things in the world if you haven't worked on your soul set, your spirituality?
And you talked about the seven different wealths. You talked about it's not just chasing money as wealth, because that's what people categorize, wealth as. But human beings are very impatient. It's always now o'clock. If people had the opportunity to find a cheat code for success, they would definitely take that route. I mean, first-time entrepreneurs, they don't want to pay the price to get the prize. They want to put success in the microwave, hit 30 seconds, and literally press start and manifest it. How do you balance patience and impatience?
It's a brilliant question. What I'd say, first of all, is if you rush to success, you miss the reward, because the reward is not success. The reward is what the process to the mountaintop makes of you as a woman or a man. Let's say you build a world-class company. That takes creativity, that takes honor, that takes ethics, that takes patience, that takes discipline, that takes work, that takes turning adversity into opportunity. Why would you miss out on that process that makes you into your noble nature by wanting it quick? What's the seduction with quick? A great relationship takes a lifetime. So I would say to first-time entrepreneurs, breathe and enjoy the process. How do you balance it? I don't know. How do you balance impatience? I mean, I've always been very impatient too. I've got a fire in the belly, but as I've got older, I've learned to savor the process much more. I've learned it's better to produce one Ferrari than 1,000 mediocrities. Michelangelo spent 4 years on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And again, I see so many entrepreneurs, it's like pushing out an ebook and pushing out this and pushing out a video and pushing out an interview it's like they're putting out 15 things every day, a Snapchat and a this and a that. Just spend 10 years on one book.
Mastery.
Just spend 10 years on one ceiling. Spend 10 years on one theory of science. Charles Darwin spent, I believe it was 7 years studying barnacles. But that formed part of his process to come up with the survival of the fittest, the theory of evolution. So patience, 20 years of anonymous is what mastery takes. And here's what I'd say as well. Vincent van Gogh only sold 2 paintings in his lifetime. Vincent van Gogh died dirt poor. There's a movie that I would encourage all of your viewers to watch. And it's called At Eternity's Gate with Willem Dafoe. And it's about Van Gogh's life. It's stunning. And what I'm trying to say is Van Gogh did not paint for fame. He died poor. It was like 50 years after he died or whatever that his paintings are being sold for tens of millions, if not more. He painted because he had no choice to paint. I write because I have no choice but to write. And when you find your work where you have no choice but to do it, and you do not do it for FFA, fame, fortune, and applause, you do it because it honors that noble nature within you. It honors the genius that resides within every human heart. When you do that, well, then life has a very fair accounting system and you get rewarded.
When I first got involved in building teams, and one of the books, by the way, that helped me build over an organization of 130,000 customers and leaders is The Leader Who Had No Title. All your books has really impacted me, but in 2000, when I went back a few years ago from a leadership point of view, this really changed it for me. Right now, leadership comes in many forms, starting from the head of a family, maybe a principal at school, a team captain, leadership roles in organizations. But as we speak, the world faces 3 viruses right now: the coronavirus, the racism virus, and the recession virus. And this uncertainty, frustration, and fear, we've all seen leadership like never before. Presidents and prime ministers are faced with massive decisions that hold the lives of many in their hands. South African presidents right now, the president is standing up more than he's ever done before. So, and a lot of other countries out there. But what advice can you give to leaders that are in a high level or that have the power during this time? And what advice can you give to citizens that have to listen to these leaders during this time with what we have to face?
I would say a few things. I would say, first of all, great leaders are born not in days of sunshine, but during hours of darkness. Winston Churchill became Winston Churchill May 10th, 1940, when he became the Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's when he stepped into leadership. Nelson Mandela became Nelson Mandela when he was thrust into turbulence. So this is actually the finest time in the history of our lives for all of us to show leadership. I don't want to give advice to, positional leaders, people in authority, but I just say, if you have a title, whether you're, a stateswoman or statesman or a CEO, I would say, remember, to lead is to serve. I would say, remember, to lead is to over-communicate in difficult times. I would say, remember, to lead is to provide hope to people who are terrified. I would say to lead is to also manage yourself. It's never been so important to come up with a great morning routine. I'm not just saying that because of the book. How do you live a great day, a productive day, a peaceful day, a focused day when the world is in flames? Well, when the rest of the world is asleep, you're up early. You're dialing in your mindset. You're working your heart set. You're reading the great philosophy. You're praying. You're meditating. You're running on a treadmill. You're drinking coffee for cognitive enhancement, for antioxidants. You do some yoga. You write in a journal. I would say for a citizen, Mother Teresa said it far better than I ever could. She said, if every one of us could only sweep our own doorstep, the whole world would be clean. So as a citizen, rather than blaming the world, blaming the recession, blaming the coronavirus, I would say, ask yourself, what are you doing to be helpful in the building of a better world? I'd say there's a fourth virus, Sashin. It's the virus of victimitis, excusitis. It's the virus of most of the people on the planet who have fallen into victimhood versus heroship. It's not their fault because people have told them, you can't start a business, you can't create a masterpiece, you can't run a marathon, you can't stand on the moon. Look what SpaceX just did. You can't, society, from the moment we're born, our well-intentioned parents, generally, unless they've done a lot of healing, it's you can't. And then we go to school, you can't. And then we listen to the media, you can't. And then, all around us is can't versus can. And so we experience this brainwashing process where we become masters of can't versus virtuosos of can. And so I think it's a virus. And that's why I'm still doing what I'm doing 24 years after I started, reminding people of their greatness, reminding people of the genius within them. And in the 5 a.m. Club, that's why there's not only philosophy and spirituality, there's neuroscience. You can't argue with the fact our brains can produce dopamine if we do the right things, like exercising in the morning, and serotonin and norepinephrine. And if we get away from our phones and our devices, we will drop into flow.
And whilst we're on that phone, because I know you talk about cell phones costing people money.
Totally.
Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, you can change the world. You can play with your device. You can't do both. Your device is costing you your fortune. But it's not only economic. Your device is costing you your fortunes of creativity. Your devices are costing you your fortunes of productivity. Your device is costing you I don't know about you, Sashin. Even when I check my social media feed, I feel depleted.
Yeah.
My energy goes down. And here's the science. It's called cognitive bandwidth and attention residue. We didn't get into a lot of the science, and it's okay, but You wake up in the morning, you have a full well of cognitive bandwidth. And then you check your phone, your cognitive bandwidth, you've just depleted some of it. And then attention residue means you check for a like or a notification. Some of your attention that you woke up with, the residue is left on the phone. Now, you do that 100 times a day. No wonder you have no focus. No wonder you have no creativity. No wonder you do work that doesn't dominate your domain. No wonder you're not present with your boyfriend, girlfriend, family. No wonder you have no inner peace. No wonder you can't sleep. No wonder you can't focus. Your addiction. There's a line in the book, an addiction and distraction is the death of creative production. We're a planet of cyber zombies. Look at any great master. They weren't on their devices all day long.
They didn't have devices back then.
Pardon me?
They didn't even have devices back then, which is incredible, which is probably the best thing.
It brings up the question, are we destroying our creativity in this age we live in? I was at Salvador Dali's home in, I think it's called Caracas, and it's this beautiful or this interesting home in a little tiny fishing village in Spain. And it made me think, many of the greatest creative people, even the corporate titans, Aristotle Onassis and his island, so many of the world's greatest thinkers had seaside homes, little villages. They were around beauty. They were around nature. They were away from the world. You can be in the world or you can do world-class work. I don't think you can do both. And that is the danger right now. And we know that technology is designed to hook. It's designed for addiction.
So, Robin, I want to get into the 5 a.m. club. And why would you say it's so important to be a part of the 5 a.m. club? And what is the difference with someone who wakes up at 5 or 7?
There is a magic in the... Do you get up at 5?
Sorry?
Do you get up at 5?
I'm the guy that sleeps at 2 a.m. and wakes up at 6, 7. I'm trying to move from not sleeping late, because I feel like that's my productive hours, but I want to be able to shift that. I want to be able to sleep at 10, 11 and wake up at 5, because when the world's asleep, you can extract all that energy that no one's absorbing. But I need that, that push. And I know, because I personally, I want to sleep at 2 a.m. and wake up at 7, 8, because I'm productive around that time. But this is why I picked up not just one copy, I bought 10 copies of this book for my entire organization leadership to make sure that they start doing it, but I need to be able to start doing it first.
So as you get up at 5 a.m., and by the way, the 5 a.m. club is not about sleep deprivation. There's very good science confirming the number one way to shorten your life is through sleep deprivation. And when we're tired, we never do our best work. Our moods are lower. We increase cortisol. We're just less productive. So, there's a chapter in the book called The Essentialness of Sleep. It's very important to get 7 to 9 hours. One of my secret weapons, as a matter of fact, sleep is a secret weapon. And we could spend an entire podcast episode session talking about sleep is not a luxury, it's a necessity. There's a model in the book, The Twin Cycles of Elite Performance, extremely important. The greatest performers on the planet, they don't work hard, they work smart. They don't work long, they work in short bursts of intensity. There's a concept I teach called the 5 great hours. I think any entrepreneur who works more than 5 hours a day is wasting their time. 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, it's an outdated way of working. It comes from the factory age. It comes from, okay, if I work from 9 to, factory owner said, if the people on the factory line work longer, they'll make more, the owner will make more money. And so now we're in this world where we have fallen into a seduction that I can get more done if I work longer. This is so important. So we feel guilty if we're not working all the time. But the game of the Titans is to work in short bursts of brilliance, short bursts of genius, 5 hours a day. If you literally timed yourself, I have these all through my house, these old school, and you time yourself 5 hours a day, and you put away your devices, and you go into what I call in the 5 a.m. Club, your tight bubble of total focus. And you literally work 5 hours, monomaniacally focused. You get more done in 5 hours than most people get done in a week. And then you could take a nap, and then you could rest, and then you could go to art galleries. Then you can hang out with your family. 5 hours a day. I believe it's a revolutionary idea. So I would say make sure you get sleep and make sure you understand great performance and elite productivity is about when you work. Even if it's only 2 hours a day. 1 hour a day. You can work for 1 hour a day and do magical work. And then take the time to rest. Because genius, being able to work with incredible brilliance only comes when you've rested, when you've recovered, and when you're full of joy. Why is 5 a.m. important? Because it's the time of least distraction. It's just the quietude is incredible. It's a time of magic. It's a time when you can hear the birds. It's peaceful. You can think. It's the best time I know of to work on yourself, for self-care, for self-mastery. If you want mastery in the outer world, it comes from mastery within. Your income will never be any higher than your self-identity. People who want more money, if they don't have it, it's because at some level they don't feel they deserve it. It's a self-esteem issue. So build that interior core. Why did the sages, saints, and seers get up between 4 and they all did 4 to 6? They would meditate. They would pray. They would read the holy book. They would write in a journal. Why? It's because it's the time when you are most available to healing, to growth, to being influenced. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it becomes a 5-alarm fire.
Briefly talk to me about the 20-20-20 formula. And I don't want to go into too much of detail because I want them to get the book. But from a point of just giving them a bit of information to actually start applying it right now until they get the book and finish off the book.
So the 20-20-20 formula is based on the model that I taught to the billionaires that I've mentored over almost a quarter of a century, because I wanted them to start their day well. The fundamental principle is the way you begin your day dramatically sets up the way the rest of your day unfolds. Do not start your day with news. Right now, it's very easy, isn't it, Sashin, to start your day with news. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You don't know what is happening on the planet. You don't know what is going on with the pandemic. You don't know what is happening with the market. 5 to 6 is what I call in the book the victory hour. And then the formula you mentioned is the template to follow. It's a prescriptive 60-minute morning routine that is helping millions of people transform. High level, the first 20-minute pocket of the 20-20-20 formula is called move. 5 to 5:20, you have to sweat. Why sweat? Through running or through skipping or through cycling. Because when you sweat, you release BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which John Ratey at Harvard Medical School or maybe it's Harvard University, has said is like miracle grow for the brain. BDNF actually repairs brain cells damaged by stress. Sashin, it actually promotes neurogenesis. We've been taught that you can't recreate new brain cells. Yes, you can through BDNF. Exercising first thing in the morning increases your metabolic rate, gives you more energy, reduces inflammation, increases immunity, which is important right now, releases dopamine, the inspirational neurotransmitter, releases norepinephrine, which gives you focus. We suffer from collective ADD. Norepinephrine gives you focus. If I don't exercise first thing in the morning, I'm scattered. If I go downstairs like I did to be here for you today and get on my spin bike, I'm centered. I could talk about serotonin. I could talk about all the other neurochemicals. Anyway, now it's 5:20. Oh, and I hydrate. While I'm working out, I hydrate and I supplement. So that first 20-minute pocket of moving, I'm sweating, I'm doing burpees, I'm doing planks, I'm doing push-ups, I'm hydrating, I'm supplementing because I put supplements in here. And generally I'm learning too. Watching a course, watching a whatever, listening to an audiobook. Now it's 5:20, second part of the 20-20-20 formula, very high level. As you said, I go deep into it into the book. That's about reflect. The billionaires, the titans, the great superstars I've mentored, they're all very reflective. They spend a lot of time thinking. Then their actions are precise. So 5:20 to 5:40 is about reflection. This is where you can meditate. Right now is a great time to learn to meditate or dial up your meditation. It will center you, ground you, anchor you, and remind you that the nature of nature is change. We're going through a season right now. There's a set of woods that I love to walk in, and there's a sign, and it simply says, from time to time, the forest will experience great turbulence through fires, insects, and natural degeneration. This is necessary for the long-term survival of the forest. And so 20 minutes of meditation to anchor you into the truths of life. Or you can write in a journal, which I do almost every morning. This is my journal. Here's my journaling. I've done this just over the past few weeks because there's a lot to journal about. So you can journal, you can pray, you can meditate, or you can simply sit in silence and just sit there and become comfortable in stillness, solitude, and silence. I call them the 3 S's: stillness, solitude, and silence. See, this is how you become strong in your Robben Island moments. And then finally, the final part of the 20-20-20 formula, it's now 5:40. The rest of the world is asleep. Imagine how you feel. And this is the final pocket is grow. The true titans and the heavyweights of industry, of business, of humanity, loved learning, massively curious. Look at your success is not random. I do believe in destiny and karma, but we must do our part as well. And my guess is that's just a small portion of your library. And I don't know how old you are, but you're a young man.
26 years old.
That's remarkable. You're 26 years old, and look at your library. When I walk into the homes of the billionaires and the statesmen and stateswomen, the world changers, I don't see a big TV. I don't see entertainment. I see books. Books, you look at the great artists, you see books everywhere. Look at your library. I I had a conversation with someone yesterday. He said, I talked to someone, it was a 5-minute conversation. And he said, make sure as you go through life, pass it on. He goes, that conversation changed my life. Well, reading a book is a conversation with the author. And if you read the right books, we are forever changed from that conversation. So 5:40 to 6 o'clock is when you'll read. Or maybe it's an audiobook. Or maybe it's a good video. Now it's 6 o'clock. I mean, it just tell me, how do you think you'd feel running that morning routine?
Without a doubt. Most people say, win the morning to win the day. I believe win the morning to win your life back.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost our lives. Is this how so many people are living? Is it living? Being in front of a white screen, being addicted to getting likes, being addicted to trifles and trivialities that at the end of human life amount to nothing?
Yeah, I mean, before we wrap this up, I literally got to a point where I had so much, all my businesses are run online, and I made sure that every single hour, I was either spending an hour on this business or that. And I said, hold on, I'm going to hire people to do it for me, and I'm going to own my life back. I'd rather pay them to do it, to own their craft, so I have the ability to think, research, and expand. But Robin, before we wrap this up, I always end it off with asking every one of my guests, what does self-love and self-talk look like with Robin Sharma?
Oh, what a brilliant question. What a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I'd say self-love is honoring the noble part of you. I believe we have an egoic self that formed through the hurts of life. That's our fearful side. Causes us to be selfish, causes us to have addictions, causes us to disconnect from truth and wisdom and love. And then we have our higher nature, our heroic nature, our finest selves. Self-love is honoring that part of ourselves, building intimacy with it, and then going out into a cold, hard, scary world and living that nature, even if you're an army of one. Self-love to me is standing for love in the world. It's not only love of your fellow human being, it's love of your mission, love of your values, love of your work, love of who you are.
Incredible. So, Robin, I want to thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and before we wrap this up, everyone, make sure you click the link below. I'll put it in the description on where to follow Robin on social media. But take out the time, go invest into getting a copy of the 5 a.m. and then go tag Robin on social media with a picture of you, because I know you repost a lot of those pictures. So go tag Robin with the picture of you and the book. But Robin Sharma, I want to thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your humility is just ridiculous. And I appreciate you for just being you and serving. As much as you talk about Nelson Mandela and all these icons of the world, you're right next to them. With the impact you're making in your books and your time, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on the Millionaire Student Show.
You're an amazing young man, Sashin. I thank you and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.